Welcome, everyone, to the Dynasty Six Pack here on the Fantasy Six Pack Network. And for episode number 1, we're going to talk about the number 1 fantasy players in Dynasty Fantasy Football at each position. Stick with us through this journey on this episode and all throughout the show here on the Dynasty Six Pack. All right, here we are on the Dynasty Six Pack, brand new show here on the Fantasy Six Pack Network. So be sure, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, certainly on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video. If you're listening to the audio broadcast, also subscribe and rate, review wherever you can. I appreciate that. I appreciate your support, not only to grow the show, but also to help us get better and grow along with you. So this will be a great journey here. And that we're excited to be on. And who are we? Well, I'm Kyle Senra, at Senra Says, and joining me are two of my co-hosts. So we've got Rahul Natarajan. Rahul, how are you doing?
Kyle, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, the Fantasy Six Pack, for letting us do our thing. Very excited. I think I was telling both you and Jamie right before that this is my way of dipping my toe back in gently into the world of fantasy football. I've been on extended hiatus due to some tragic finals losses in week 17, but very excited to be back doing the show with both of you.
My key this year to avoiding tragic finals losses was not making a single final. All the semifinals were the tragic losses, but the season was, yes, equally traumatic for some and certainly glorious for others. All the people that beat us in those playoff games. So good to those people. But yeah, it sucks for us. But doesn't suck to be here. Certainly great that Rahul, you agreed to join us here as your first foray on the Fantasy Six Pack family of content. So welcome to Fantasy Six Pack.
Thank you, sir. It is. Yeah. Thank you again for Fantasy Six Pack and to you both. And really looking forward to doing the show. Admired both, watched a lot of both of your content and definitely interact with you on the shows that I've done. And it's really excited to be here on the show with you too.
And there's someone in the comments, but also someone on the video named Jamie Perog. So Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm excited to be here. You know me, love talking Dynasty.
Yeah, for sure. Dynasty fantasy football, fantasy, of course, of any kind. But yeah, we'll be focused on Dynasty all year long because Dynasty really is a year-long endeavor. And Jamie, you and I both been with Fantasy Six Pack for a bit now and creating content there. So why don't, before we get started, you share a little bit of what you've done so far with Fantasy Six Pack?
Yeah, I did a weekly article during the season. Broke down some of the wide receiver, first cornerback matchups. I just put a few of the good matchups for the receivers and some of the bad matchups that you want to kind of avoid or temper expectations on. I think it did pretty well.
Yeah, great job. That's some great advice in such a weekly matchup-based game. I mean, that's my article series for Fantasy Six Pack last year, debuted in 2024 with them, is also weekly based, the goal line guide. Something I've been doing with other sites, but now happy to have Fantasy Six Pack host that article. It's a weekly look comparison of teams based on their own touchdown efficiency and their defense's touchdown efficiency, allowing inside the 5-yard line. It's all the key there. A couple of years ago, I researched and plays inside the 5. I think rushing wise carried a 27, 28% touchdown rate. And then outside the 5, it was down at like 12, 11. And across the whole field, which does include those, if you just don't filter them out. So it's it's more than doubles your chances. And I think receiving wise, it went up from about 20% to it's like 43%, I remember, if I remember correctly. So it all seemed like, man, it's significant pointing to plays inside the 5 really skew with touchdowns. And that's can really lead to a lot of touchdowns. So I've been years chasing touchdowns as fantasy analysis and trying to master the weekly game. So Jamie, it's funny that you and I, article wise, very centered on week to week matchup based things there, whether it's wide receiver corner matchups or touchdowns in the goal line guide. But yet we're here doing a Dynasty show. So thank you to Joe, who is here, Joe Bond, the Fantasy Six Pack founder, and head honcho, and authorized this. So I approached Joe and asked if we could do this, and he graciously said yes. Helped me set all this up. So appreciate Joe and Zach Berger behind the scenes. Done a lot to help us get to here. So yes, Joe saying, "What's up, fellas? Excited for the new show," and we are too. So yes, we get started on the topic, which is again number one fantasy players at each position in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And I gotta say, you can take this to a snake draft, but I was telling Jamie before, Rahul, that in a snake draft, there's a chance that all four of these top players are gone before you even get to pick. So while it could be important to still figure out who you want to prioritize at each position, I love auction drafts. And I guess that the very first episode, I'll start with auction propaganda already to say that that's in my opinion, the better way to do a dynasty startup. It's more fair because you give everyone a chance at every player. In theory, if you wanted to buy it, you could in an auction win all four of your number one players at each of your four positions. So making that distinction, I think, is even more important to really figure out who's the one player you want to spend the most at each position. So that's I guess a way to get people to love auction drafts, and also to intro this topic for this episode. So sorry if anyone here hates auctions. You might hear me talk about it a lot. It's my favorite way to start up.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even dabbled with auction. I've seen a lot of the content you're always helping people out in the chats, but you might just convince me along the way here.
Yeah, one of my favorite auction strategies is the studs and duds strategy. So I always try to go for those top tier players, and then just the rest of my roster, I just fill in with dollar players.
I typically go a little bit in between, where I want my entire starting lineup to be players I'm bidding up, and then everyone on my bench to be a $1 player. So if it's it's a start 10, all but 10 players, I'm going to go with the minimum. Start 12, start 14, lesser and lesser players that the further you need depth, the more that I'm less likely to lean on a studs and duds and more to a balanced approach. So I always think, like, the first thing I look at is just for that is how many starters do you have? Because I love doing a studs and duds. If you only need 7 or 8 starters, that's great. There's barely any room for anything else except studs, so you may as well spend most of your money there. But a start 13, 14, that's totally different. But this is not an auction strategy show. But that's how much we love the propaganda for Dynasty, especially, at least I do, of why we should auction draft as a fair way, because you can have access to every single one of these number one players. So let's get forward. Let's run forward with the cover boy. As you saw in the thumbnail, we have Bijan Robinson as the number one running back. And this is actually a consensus across the board. All three of us do have Bijan Robinson as the number one running back in Dynasty. Rahul, we'll start with you as to your reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan Robinson, just take us back a few years to that draft in 2023. The hype around Bijan is really at something that I hadn't seen, being relatively new to fantasy football. It's really great to see that him live up to that kind of promise and that hype. He was a first round startup pick as a rookie. It's funny though, if you take us the specific point in the 2024 season, week 5, Falcons beat the Bucs in overtime. Kirk Cousins threw for 500 yards. And all the memes were about Bijan. What was he doing? And that's just because the early season was a little bit slow. You're splitting some touches with Tyler Algier, but really it was the red zone where if they got there, it was Kirk Cousins throwing it in. But sometimes Algier was vulturing him. From that point, week 6 on, at least in half PPR, Bijan was the RB1 in points per game. And that just showed how he took off. He took on more of that bell cow role, not just with the snap share increasing, but regularly getting 20 plus touches. And I think something that has always been, had always been part of his profile, but really seen more so in the NFL level, is his ability to do a lot of damage in the pass game. We may talk about a few of the other contenders for this role, but to compare him directly to JaMarrChase, one who came out very specifically with the receiving threat as a big bonus to him. Bijan has led JaMarrGibbs in receptions in both the last 2 seasons, something you certainly wouldn't have expected from on the outset. I think it's very hard for me to look past Bijan, and I think again, not to hammer on the comparison with Gibbs has already played in the NFL's leading offense, if not the number one, certainly a top 5 offense in scoring in the last 2 years. The Falcons were nowhere near that. It was very inconsistent season throughout the season as Kirk Cousins' injury maybe started slow and then caught up to him. Michael Penix came in for a few games. And that just gives me a little more faith that the offense has more room to grow, which we could see an even larger ceiling for Bijan, who already did end up, again, half PPR. I think 19 points per game. If you took that split, it was over 20 points per game. That's what we want in fantasy football is the running backs that score 20-plus points a game. And that's what you have here in Bijan Robinson.
And I think if Michael Penix came out in those games, the offense didn't look as good, there might be concern there, right? Like we might go to a more prolific offense as the RB. Yeah. All right. Well, thankfully Michael Penix worked out. Maybe better than Kirk Cousins did. So who knows? I guess the Falcons did something right after all. Are they drafting at number 8 again this year? I wonder. London, Bijan, Penix, those all worked. And drafting number 4 didn't work so well.
Drafting number 4 didn't work. Yeah. London, Bijan, Penix. 8, yeah, 3. Wow.
A player we're not mentioning today, I don't think. But yes, Jamie, you like Bijan Robinson as RB1 too as well.
Yeah, he's definitely my number 1. Like, what are we saying? Fantasy football, volume is king, right? Dude's getting over 300 carries. Not even carries, but just the targets that he's getting. I think he's top 5 for running back in targets, top 5 in receptions, even receiving yards. He's top 5. So adding double-digit touchdowns to that, like Rahul said, 20 points per game. Give me that all day. With the 76% of the snaps that he plays, you can't beat that. Like, I know Gibbs is probably our consensus number 2, but he's only getting about 45-50% of snaps per game. So give me the guy who is getting the volume.
I think, for Gibbs, based on, a sneak peek to our next episode, I've already planned episode 2, looking at the top 2 tiers in Dynasty. We're really just focused at the very top of this episode, but we all do have Gibbs, I think, as our RB2s. And so with that, I do think, the percentage of plays, David Montgomery being better than Algier, eating into Gibbs's work a little more. If anything, for how much he's, Montgomery's being there, Gibbs is probably, in theory, too high at RB2, but there's some touches that are less valuable than others. And I think the reason Gibbs and Bijan are both up there is they both get a lot of receptions, as you both said, and they both have a high touchdown upside. And so, like, those are really, like, if you can have any sort of non-starter, you're looking for a sleeper running back, can they either have a goal line role and get some spike weeks, or a pass catching role, and that gives them a consistent floor that you can kind of utilize them in either one of those 2 dimensions. The true elite guys are the ones that get both, even if they're not getting 300 touches a game. But if you get all that and Bijan, it seems like he's the workload. It seems like he can endure it and still be effective. He makes sense as the RB1. And I think I liked him enough more than Gibbs as a prospect that there was enough of a difference there where I thought Bijan is one of the best examples of just pure technique on the tape watching versus also a great production profile and amazing athletic scores. Like, he was kind of top notch across everything. And Rahul, you were saying you hadn't seen anything quite like that. And I can think of the last time before Bijan, it was probably Saquon Barkley. Yes, where there's one singular guy, and that would have been 2018. So we've kind of dated your fantasy dynasty start there just after the 2018 season. But I guess maybe should have put that in the host intro section. But I guess that's snuck that in here a little bit to be with the topic. Jamie, how long have you been playing Dynasty for?
I think I started studying in about 2018, but I think my first year was the year after. So 2019, I believe, was my first one.
Okay. So you didn't experience the Saquon draft either, rookie draft. So that got crazy. I started playing Dynasty in 2015, if you technically count salary cap and contract, because I went right from redraft to that and then played a more traditional Dynasty format, I think probably a couple years later, maybe 17 or 18. I remember the Ezekiel Elliott hype especially after he got drafted 4th overall in 2016. I saw a league where someone traded away that 1st overall pick. They were a Cowboys fan, and as soon as Zeke got drafted by the Cowboys, they paid extra to get that pick back. And so that always struck me, and it kind of paid off. I think that team did eventually win a title, and Zeke was a huge part of that. So that was maybe the best example of a player in a fit, whereas Barkley and Bijan, I think, were more just singular. Okay, maybe the teams aren't the best, but they're so great that it doesn't even matter. I don't know. This year, did we get Ashton Gentry drafted to the Cowboys, and then it's the mix of both? I guess we'll see and we'll find out. That'll certainly be a conversation. Maybe even we'll even delve into that a little bit next episode, perhaps. But yeah, I guess Rahul, I was going to go back to you and say about Gibbs. Is there an argument for Gibbs? Like, what would be the argument for Gibbs to be?
Yeah, I think Jamie mentioned a great point about the snap shares. Obviously, Gibbs has been splitting even more so than Bijan did, even in Bijan's slow run, and necessarily towards the end of the season. Montgomery has just been an extremely solid back and fit the Detroit Lions perfectly as to what they wanted out of that kind of the thunder to the lightning of JaMarrChase. The even further upside case, I guess, is if JaMarrChase could be that 70%. 75% snap share player, and you only see Monty towards in the 20s. I don't know if we will get there with a fully healthy Montgomery. Of course, the Lions did just extend him in the middle of the last season. And knowing Dan Campbell, knowing Montgomery's strengths at the goal line, I just don't think we'll ever see him phased out. That is certainly that case for upside. Of course, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're talking about Bijan. It is strange that Bijan beat Gibbs in receptions in both of the, their first 2 seasons in the league. Perhaps there's more for Gibbs to do in the receiving game. And really the last point I would say is the ability to take one to the house from anywhere on the field. I think JaMarrChase does that the best of really anyone beyond Saquon Barkley. We can't forget with, I think, 6 or 7 60-plus yard touchdowns. In the last year, I think JaMarrChase has that capability, which Bijan may not. But when talking about the RB1, and this is why I eventually did settle on Bijan, it's just that prototypical build. Who is more likely to handle 20 touches week in, week out? I do think that's Bijan with the extra 10, 15 pounds. It makes me feel a little more comfortable in that pick, especially because in startups, I'm sure you're gonna have to spend like anywhere from like the 8th overall pick to draft Bijan onto your team. With that kind of capital, I'd rather just go for a safer kind of build. If there is one in the RB position, really.
Yeah, of course. It's the position where safety is maybe the least anonymous.
Yeah.
But, Jamie's already got a fan. I don't know about Rahul and I, but Jamie certainly does. What's up, Jamie?
What's up, man?
Room. So, yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, one more thing on Gibbs, though. If there was a few games where he was getting the 70-75% snaps, and he had like a 25-point game, 28-point game. I think he even had like a 35-point game, close to like a 40-point game. So he does have that upside when he does get those majority of snaps.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. Sorry, not to cut you off, Kyle, but that's a great point, and actually one that I wanted to turn to one of you. So cue back in. But are there any concerns about JaMarrChase now that Ben Johnson has left the Lions?
Yeah, I was going to pose that question too. You're thinking my way, Rahul. I love it. I guess maybe a little bit, but part of it is, and maybe this is also a reason why he's had more breakaway runs. Kind of circle back to your question. It's just a better offensive line that can make better blocks downfield. I mean, Penei Sewell, first team All-Pro right tackle, and some consider maybe the best offensive lineman in the league this past year. How much he does it as an outside blocker leading on those edge runs where Gibbs does so well, but also he can get to those second level spots really quickly and make some of those extra blocks. The Falcons have a decent offensive line, but not quite elite to the Lions. So I think a certain extent of their success is just the personnel they have. An OC to call it well, it certainly helps. But I also think it's just they're built in the right way for that offense to constantly succeed, because the offensive line is something they keep investing really highly in. They pay their they're established guys really well through their second and third contracts, and they're drafting them super highly, like we saw with Penny Sewell. And it was the Chase Penny Sewell argument. To be fair, the Bengals have been to a Super Bowl, the Lions haven't. So I think it's worked out for both teams, to be honest. I think both teams are pretty happy with the way that's gone. And I do wonder, because I do think Bijan has that capacity to be that, but I wonder if on the Falcons, maybe he's just given that opportunity less because of the just lack of explosive nature of the offense. Teams can maybe focus in more on Bijan, whereas maybe sometimes Gibbs can slip unnoticed if they're really having to cover Jameson Williams and Amon Ra combo, like at two different levels, one downfield, one underneath. And I mean, sometimes Gibbs gets lost there. And I wonder, I know OC again helps that, but I think it's just a really well-structured team.
Very few teams are, pulling the hook and ladder from like a 5-yard slant that gets a lateral to Gibbs, who goes on a 60-yard touchdown run. So I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Kyle.
I mean, you're dealing with player instincts. Like that's far enough in a play that like clearly the players have the instinct. So even if Ben Johnson's not there to create that for them anymore, they know that some of those things can work on their own. So I mean, he's shown the way, given the keys to a little bit to the next offensive coordinator. Too, and obviously the new twist of things as coaching changes happen. But, yeah, it's just a well-built team. So kudos to their GM. Now, actually, that's a perfect transition to the next spot because the opposite of a well-built team is the Las Vegas Raiders. Yet we have all three of us again consensus here. BrockBowers is the tight end 1 in Dynasty. So Jamie, we'll start with you. What's your big reason for that?
Just look at the people around him. You cannot put BrockBowers any lower than number 1. I don't think I've seen it anywhere. He's getting the volume. He just broke the rookie wide receiver reception record. I think Neighbors was a few receptions behind him, but Neighbors did also miss a few games. But still, being a tight end and getting over 150 targets, he was seeing like 26% of the snap share, or the target share, and he still has room to grow because I don't think he got that many touchdowns. What was it, 5 touchdowns? I know it was top 10 for tight ends, but get him a quarterback, man. He's just going to grow from there. Like I couldn't even tell you what was it, Aiden O'Connell throwing him the ball most of the year.
Well, I think Gardner Minshew probably ended up with the most attempts, but it was a split of those two if you were lucky. And there was definitely games where Desmond Ridder was throwing the football. And you are right, JB, 5 touchdowns. And I was going to bring up the target share too. 25.9% is what I found.
Yeah, that's crazy for a tight end.
Insane.
And just get the ball in his hands because his yards after the catch, insane. They're like almost 600 yards after catching the ball. And I think he almost had like 1,200 receiving yards. So that's number 1. Receptions, yards after the catch. You don't have a better tight end in this league that comes close to that.
Sorry, I was just looking at the Raiders' attempts last year, pass attempts. Gardner Minshew threw 306, Aiden O'Connell 243, Desmond Ridder threw 85. Oh, he actually had 2 touchdowns off that. That's insane. That's ridiculous. That's career year for him. And AJ Cole threw a pass. He's their punter.
And another thing with
I feel like the AJ Cole pass is probably better than any Ridder's passes.
And with Bowers in college, he actually had some rushing upside, and they're not even using that yet. And that's a possibility. They could drop some plays for him as a rusher.
Yeah, it gave him 5 carries last year. So that could be something that they definitely expand. Once you get your feet wet and proved he could dominate in the NFL, that's something you go at the next level.
Yeah, and he's got the deep target ability. Man, there's just so many things I love about BrockBowers.
Rahul, you must. I'm assuming you like 1 or 2 things about Bowers too to have him as your number 1.
Yeah, I mean, really, just to reiterate everything that Jamie said, and actually, I think where we talked about the Bijan, the JaMarrChase conversation, what more can be had from this player? I think Bowers, it's very obvious. We talked about the QB situation being exceptionally dire for the Raiders in 2024. Not that we know what the answer is going to be, but something that fills me with a little more confidence is that they seem to have brought in some brains, not just with Pete Carroll as the head coach, but obviously Brady taking on a pretty prominent role. I don't think he's not the official GM, but he's minority owner, and sounds like he'll have a lot of influence in the footballing decisions there. So it fills me with a little more confidence that they are going to put the right people around BrockBowers. And just to drive home that point about, ceiling to be found is when you compare BrockBowers' season to Sam Laporta finished as a tight end 1 with 300 less yards and 5 more touchdowns. He was like about 880 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. It was about, I think, good for 11.5 half PPR points per game. That just never sat right with me. I thought Sam Laporta was one of the worst values on the board heading into 2024, just because of how non-sticky touchdowns can be from year to year. The fact that Bowers put up a tight end 2 season on the back of just 5 touchdowns with the offensive woes around him, it just makes me think that he is a prime candidate to really elevate into that Kelsey level of difference making at the position. We don't really care about a tight end that's going to score 12, 13 points per game in half PPR. We want someone who's going to redefine the position, make the gap from TE1 to TE2 the same as TE2 to TE12. I think Bowers is the perfect candidate for that, just with the profile that he showed in college. I know Jamie talked about the yards after the catch, but if anything, I can expect more to come from him. He was just so electric with the ball in his hands in college, and maybe just the situation wasn't right for him to break those away. But I just think there's so much more to come from BrockBowers. It's really an easy tight end 1 for me. Tight end 2, which we'll get into, maybe also an easy call. Maybe we'll say that for next week, but I think hard to put him below 2, and most, as we've all done, BrockBowers is tight end 1 for us.
Yeah. Would you be guys willing to trade BrockBowers for like a king's ransom and tear down? I think Kyle froze.
Share before
there
the
we go.
season. So, so there's that. I don't know. Do either of you have any Brock? Because I don't have any BrockBowers now.
Well, you actually cut out right before you made that point, Kyle. So you can go again.
Okay, I was wondering. I thought you guys froze. It was me. I froze in the moment. I think I'm almost the same to say. Yeah, I traded away my only Bowers share before the season started. So I got Malik Neighbors as part of it. So it was it was a fairly flat deal. Not our trade of the week, so we won't get into it. Because essentially those are the 2 big pieces, right? Now they'll be forever linked as rookies. Yeah, it's a tight end premium league, so there's maybe some regret. I could be the tight end 1, but I don't know that Malik Neighbors is that far away from being the wide receiver 1. So from a production standpoint, they're both pretty close. As JD mentioned, I think Bowers broke the rookie reception and receiving yard record, and at one point, Neighbors held both of them last year. So they broke it from each other. I think we've seen 5 of the top rookie receiving and reception seasons in the past, I think, 5 years. At one point, Jalen Waddle had the reception record.
Right.
So that was one that we keep seeing it broken. I think the comparison between Sam Laporta and Bowers' rookie season comes back to something Jamie mentioned originally: target share. And looking at Laporta's rookie season, he had a 21.1% target share, which is pretty good, but not quite the same level as the 25%, 25.9, almost 26% that Bowers had. And guess what? Laporta dipped to 17% last year. So there is room with Bowers that maybe that does drop. And in fact, Laporta saw a better, looking at his stats, better yards per reception, like that went up. But his touchdowns went down, as mentioned by Rahul. It's less sticky. Still scored 7. So there's going to be a certain extent of Laporta's skill set that is scoring touchdowns. It kind of reminds me of Mark Andrews. Like, he was constantly in the 10-7 touchdowns early, even if he wasn't getting 1,000 yards. So that'll be part of Laporta's skill set, but that also means he'll be very inconsistent week to week. We saw that certainly in some really low floor games last year. Bowers going to be one of the safest floors because of that target share. The only player that could maybe come close to matching that and projecting, because I think, and this is something I'm going to mention later on, but the projectability of a rookie season, I think you can safely project Bowers as another 25% target share season. Like, that to me seems repeatable. And if he does that on 1,100 yards, with better quarterback play, you would expect more than 5 touchdowns. That's where that could go up. Only 10.7 yards per reception. So maybe that's something like Laporte. It went up by 2 yards per catch from 1 year to the next. As even with a struggle season for Laporte, overall less targets, less volume, as you mentioned, with the less target share. But that target share is really what drives me to want to have Bowers. And again, I think the only player that could match that is what I imagine will, for a lot of us, be our tight end too. I think we hinted at it already, TreyMcBride. And I think I was very close to putting him there. So, Jamie, I think that's the only thing I'll push back on is that I do have McBride to the point where I almost considered McBride at 1. I think you can make that solid argument how he's developed. Like, again, another guy, he's definitely in store for some touchdown regression. And he was sitting at 0 for so much of the year, eventually got them late. So even a little in-season touchdown regression. But 29.3% target share for TreyMcBride. Just wild. I think that's something where you could project, the season before he was at 19.6. So a 10% bump is pretty extreme, but is also that just the way the offense is now. There's no Zach Ertz there at all. This is McBride is a featured weapon, one of the top 2 options. I think somewhere around a 24 to 25% target share is reasonable. I think 29 might be extreme, but I think you can safely project McBride and Bowers at really similar stats. McBride's only a year further in his career than or I guess 2 years further in his career than Bowers is. So it's not like he's that much older. So I think we could see both of them being the top 2 tight ends in Dynasty for some time.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me is if the Cardinals get someone, I don't know, like Ibuka, he's going to play a lot of the slot, and I know McBride played almost 40% of his snaps in the slot. I think Bowers was close, 39, 40% also. But yeah, I could just see the Cardinals grabbing like a slot receiver to take away from McBride's slot work rather than the Raiders grabbing a slot receiver because they needed someone on the outside.
Well, and I mean, Joe is making this in the comment too. I mean, the Raiders are, I think, just as likely, if not even more likely than the Cardinals to address that. I guess maybe it makes it easier for the Raiders, or I guess for the Cardinals, sorry, to your point, Jamie, about McBride, to address that because they don't have to address quarterback. Like, they don't have to spend resources finding a quarterback. So they might make it right. They could make it really interesting. Maybe the Raiders do too if they get, let's say, a free agent quarterback and they don't have to focus on a wide receiver in the draft. I guess we're not that far away from knowing the answer to that, how that's going to work. But yeah, to Joe's asking a question here. Any thought that this could have been Bowers' best season? They will have to imagine they had some more playmakers around him. So I think, Jamie, you were making this point last year about Puka Nacua, right? The previous record holder for that rookie reception receiving yard mark. And you were kind of fading Puka last year, thinking, can he really replicate that? Like what he did year 1 might be his best season. But I also think you may have now bought into Puka after seeing him do it 2 years in a row. I think he was in full PPR. He was, I believe, the wide receiver 2 or 3 in points per game. He was essentially identical to Jefferson. Obviously, he missed a lot of time, so the total points weren't there. But I think has Puka doing that also kind of helped you? Like, you could see, okay, sometimes these signals we see year 1 do replicate and translate. So as Puka's kind of maybe proving you wrong a little bit, also made you buy in more in Bowers.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen Bowers' best season. Just we'll wait until he gets a quarterback, and like his efficiency will probably go up a lot. I mean, we've already seen his productivity blow up, and I don't see it really getting much lower if it does at all. He's going to be the best player in that offense.
I do think there's a chance. I mean, if it maybe a better quarterback doesn't have to target him as much, right? They are capable of spreading the ball around and the offense being kind of productive. It got to a certain point where, for a poor quarterback play, maybe targeting the tight end is better as opposed to targeting downfield outside to the wide receiver. So a better quarterback that is more confidence on the outside could, in theory, maybe lower his target share. But then again, maybe that means more touchdown opportunities. So it might be his best, more consistent season, but I think there could still be some spike weeks coming. I think I tend to agree with you, Jamie, betting on the quarterback being improving at some point eventually. I mean, they've got rid of Minshew, so they've already clearly committed to it won't be the same quarterback room as last year. Now, by getting rid of Minshew, does that mean more pass attempts for Aiden O'Connell? That might not be as the same. But Rahul, do you? I mean, I think it's possible. It is possible it could be his best season. But what do you think, Rahul?
It's always possible in this game we play, right? But I think I'm with you both. I think you would. I don't know if you agree, Kyle, but I definitely agree with what Jamie said there. I do think more is to come from BrockBowers for all the reasons he said. I mean, this is a guy who could have a 10+ touchdown season, whether that's just the pure variance of the game, or if that comes through the improvement in the quarterback position. I think there's more to come. One stat that I had forgotten to mention earlier, but it really just tells me a lot about the type of player BrockBowers is more than half of his receptions went for first downs. And to set the rookie reception record and to do that, so at 110 reception, about 60 went for first downs, shows me that he's just like an integral piece of the offense. It's not just the dink and dunks. And even if competition were to come in, he's not going to be phased out to an extent where, the volume could go down, but like you both said, the efficiency will go up. And to actually bring it back to the point we were making about TreyMcBride, I think McBride, is actually very close. It is a pretty. It could be a toss-up for certain people. And I wouldn't be mad at someone putting them McBride over, putting them in the same tier. The presence of Marvin Harrison Jr., a blue chip prospect, we didn't see necessarily on the field, but taken with the 4th overall pick, I think that's the kind of player who I would expect to ascend and perhaps take a little off TreyMcBride. They currently play in an offense. I want to say Alex Van Pelt. Maybe that's the Patriots OC, but I think it's all.
I think they brought in Chip Kelly for you're talking about the Cardinals, right?
The Cardinals. Whoever it is off that Kevin Stefanski tree, very tight end heavy. Kyler Murray really struggled to throw the ball deep. What Murray was doing last year just did not jive with Marvin Harrison. There's a lot that Harrison can certainly improve on as well. But I think if anything, we're more likely to have seen McBride's best than Bowers' best, because I think there's more potential for the Cardinals to have that kind of weapon that takes away from from the tight end TreyMcBride than the Raiders. Who knows what's going to happen, but I don't foresee the Raiders taking Ted McMillan, for example, at 6, or going for that caliber of wide receiver. That at least, we keep coming back to the potential ceiling past what we've seen, and I think it's just higher for BrockBowers for me than it is for TreyMcBride.
How good Marvin Harrison is as a prospect, it's going to be tough to imagine the Raiders ever drafting a prospect that good.
Exactly.
One of them might. I mean, the kid at Ohio State, I think his name is Jeremiah Smith. Expected to come out in 2027. Yes. If they get him, maybe, because he looks to be that good. But it does feel like you're going to need that type of once every few years type of kind of prospect to come out to really contend there. Also, to answer your question, Rahul, Drew Petzig is the offensive coordinator. They hired him last year. So actually 2 years ago. He's been there. He's been there ever since Gannon's been there. So
yeah, very and that offense
will be consistent at least. Like that.
Yeah,
you like that.
Maybe you do like that. I think there's a lot to like about the Cardinals offense. At times, it was honestly one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. As the season went on, it got James Conner still going strong, but from the passing game, it's still very dink and dunk. Not really pushing the ball down the field. It was a lot that really fed into TreyMcBride's skills, getting a lot of those short area targets. Now McBride is absolutely a beast with the ball in his hands. The number of guys he hurdled week in, week out was very impressive to see. But if anything, I would see this as the most ideal situation that TreyMcBride is in, and the factors such as Marvin Harrison getting a little bit better, Kyler Murray getting a little more comfortable in the system, throwing the ball deep. We have to remember Murray's only, I think, 18 months removed also from an ACL tear as well.
Yeah.
I think McBride was in his prime offensive situation. Touchdowns didn't come, but for those reasons, Bowers being in probably one of the worst offensive situations he'll face in his NFL career, I see a little more upside.
Yeah, I agree. Marvin Harrison, people are hating on him because he didn't have his big, huge season, but for a rookie, he had like 60 receptions, almost 900 yards. I think he was close to double-digit touchdowns. Not quite there. That's still good for a rookie. He's going to take steps forward. If you look at his dad's rookie year, I believe they were almost identical with like receptions, yards, and touchdowns.
Oh, he did have 8 touchdowns. That's wild because for a while he was struggling. He was. I'm surprised. I just looked it up. I would have thought it would have been low. I thought it would have been like a 5, like Bowers, to be honest, because he did struggle to find the end zone a little bit. But yeah, almost 900 yards. Man, what is the catch rate? Exactly 50%. That's not great. Like that's.
Well, it's his true catch rate because they could have been like off target.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Let me see.
116 targets for 62 catches. Like that's a pretty bad rate. So it certainly, like, I guess I was about to correct myself and I said, oh, consistency is good, right? Like for McBride, you'd love having Penzick there. I guess if you had Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe you didn't want consistency because of the season, but I guess like that's more, that many targets and that few catches, that's more the quarterback and wide receiver. Like is part of that Kyler, is part of that Marvin, is it a bit of both? So I would reasonably expect a better catch rate next year.
I think so. I watched, unfortunately or not, I watched a lot of the Cardinals. I was very tethered to Kyler Murray last year, and it was extremely inconsistent. And a lot of the times you would see him, the play break down. He did terrible under pressure, and he was always just looking for McBride as the easy button. McBride really racked up the receptions. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think he beat Bowers at least, but I just think there's more offensive upside to come from Bowers. And that's the reason. The year difference, 2 years difference doesn't make too much of an impact for me. They're both very young and will play in the league for a long time. And it's just the potential ceiling, I think, is a little bit higher for Bowers.
Yeah, I'm looking at Marvin Harrison. His actual catch rate, 53.4%, but his true catch rate, 78.5%.
Yeah.
Okay, so taking out the off-target throws, I suppose.
Yeah, it divides like the total receptions by the actual catchable targets.
And maybe fitting that we're spending so much time talking about 2 tight ends on our episode number 1, and they were separated by 1 reception.
Yeah,
112 to 111 for McBride. So again, that's why I tend to feel like they're super close. Which maybe back to Joe's argument is maybe why you fade Bowers, maybe why you fade both of them and fade the tight end position early in Dynasty anyway, and say that this is not the position I want to go at the number 1 guys. It's the other positions. I want to go get Bijan or Gibbs. I want to get the top wide receivers, whoever you view that is. I want to go get JoshAllen or JaydenDaniels or someone else maybe. But yes, a couple people on this pod really bite into someone who kind of strange, right? Talking up JoshAllen as your number 1 quarterbacks, guys. He's only finished as the 1 or 2 quarterback like 5 years in a row. It's really weird. No, so much sarcasm there. That was so unnecessary. But maybe there's the analysis on JoshAllen is unnecessary further beyond that he's just always QB 1 or 2. So why go any different? I'm gonna pull a quarterback. I'm gonna throw it out there and see who catches it. Who wants to go first on JoshAllen?
Let me take that. I do hope the audio listeners caught that sarcasm as well. Obviously, we're talking about the reigning MVP of the NFL, whether or not you think that was deserved. But no, it's not just that. I think, the lowest finish that he's had in the last 5 years was point per game, QB3. Last year was actually his first under 24 points per game at 20, a measly 22.6. So it's not just that you're getting one of the top players at the position. Quarterback is a position where the elite really do separate themselves from the pack. It's very similar to tight end, how it's been in years of recent old. But it's just hard for me to go away with such a proven commodity that JoshAllen is. And I think that while, yes, points per game came down just a touch last year, he had maybe a lower floor than he's ever been. There's a stat in the middle of the season that JoshAllen had as many weekly finishes outside the top 18 quarterbacks in 2024 as he did in the previous 3 years. And I think that's almost more to there were quite a few early season blowouts. The Bills D really started the season high. I think the Jags, they played the Jags. There's like 30 to 0 in like the second quarter. and Josh Allen didn't really throw too much. He also, and this is a good question to see whether it'll continue, under Joe Brady, they became a very prolific rushing attack. Obviously, Josh Allen's part of that. He really racked up their version of the tush push towards the end of the year, but James Cook had 16 rushing touchdowns after having only 4 combined the last 2 seasons. Ray Davis popped up with some rushing touchdowns. Ty Johnson was I just saw a stat that he led the NFL in yards per touch, which is honestly kind of insane. I'm sure there are all sorts of minimum touch, minimum yard qualifiers, but I see more of a regression from the non-Josh Allen touchdowns than from Josh Allen, the touchdowns that he had on the ground. And of course, this was his first year in quite a while without that alpha wide receiver. Stephon Diggs obviously parted ways in the offseason. I think there is more to come from, of course, Jeff Lambert's favorite, Keon Coleman. Dalton Kincaid really hasn't hit the heights that we hoped he would. Khalil Shakir is a very, almost pedestrian profile, but for such a small guy, he's just a yak monster. He's very reliable, developed into a reliable target. I still just think there's more to come from Josh Allen, even as he's led the position for the last 5 years. It's hard for me to put anyone ahead of him. One qualm, perhaps, he's turning 29 in May, and QB is obviously a position where longevity is unlike any other, but at the same time, with the style of quarterback he is, the hits he takes, could there be a question that his drop-off is a little more swift than his age indicates? Maybe. But for me, for all the reasons I shared before, that is why Josh Allen is my QB1 dynasty.
I think that the one point I want to make and kind of almost answer your question, I guess this was a half question. You didn't really ask it with a question mark at the end. Some quarterbacks get their ceiling through rushing and their floor performances passing. Some quarterbacks are the opposite. Daniel Jones, I always kind of hated when people talk about him as an upside quarterback because he was actually a very safe week-to-week quarterback because of his rushing yards. But Daniel Jones was pretty bad at producing touchdowns. Like he had one total touchdown, like one season of total touchdowns above 20. And so someone who he would have one of the lowest floors, actually, very little week-to-week upside. So he's like an example, probably opposite of Josh Allen, because Allen, his upside comes entirely from touchdowns, right? Like it's one of those, man, he could just score 3 at any point. I mean, you saw him have a 6 touchdown game. And it didn't even seem like it was that difficult for him to do earlier this season. Like the 30-point games were there, but as you mentioned, Rahul, the games outside the top 18 just kept racking up more than it had been. You said 3 seasons combined.
3 seasons combined. Yeah, right. But yeah, exactly to elaborate on the point you were making, Kyle, is he had 5 games above 28 points, 2 above 40, and of course, the highest ever fantasy score by a quarterback, actually a game that I was at here in Los Angeles, when he put up 51 and nearly hero balled one of my redraft teams to the playoffs. But
almost hero balled them to a win because they actually lost that game.
They actually lost that game if Sean McDermott had made a weird timeout call right on the 1. But yeah, it's the kind of game where the weekly ceiling is what trumps everything. I'm not sure if you guys look too much into like fantasy points over replacement, but really the ability to have those kind of like game-breaking weeks is more valuable than someone who maybe gets 24 points week in, week out. It might be better to have 40 points on a certain week and then 16, and you hope the rest of your team can carry you that week. But the 40-point week, you're certainly winning that week, and Josh Allen can always do that.
You especially need those in the playoffs when championships are on the line. That's where you're really defaulting to ceiling performances. For the simple fact is you're playing against the best teams in the playoffs, so you're always a good safe floor can help you beat the average team in the regular season. That's what helps get you to the playoffs, so that is needed and important. But the whole point I was going to make is his floor might have been so low this year because his floor usually comes from just sheer volume of plays, right? Whether he's running or throwing, his number of touches, like in terms of like carries and pass attempts to produce fantasy points, is always so high. But because a lot of that comes from just pure volume, they were so bad at throwing this year that they were so inefficient. The yards per attempt was really down for him too, and as you mentioned, they just kind of kept running more. Okay, more to James Cook, more to the other guys. So the passing volume was low. So suddenly his floor, the thing that caused his floor, having the guy that monopolizes all the touches, it was there less. The ceiling performances were still there, enough for him to finish as the top quarterback. But yeah, do we see seasons if that's the opposite of what we've been saying about Bowers, right? Or it's the same thing about Bowers, but from the opposite perspective. Man, you just get him that one other weapon. They get him like a BrockBowers type. That would be amazing. If BrockBowers and JoshAllen, that'd be amazing too, right? But his floor we could see his floor get back to where it was if they invest properly at the wide receivers.
It's no surprise, when Mac Hollins is one of the primary red zone weapons, as well as he did for the expectations. The corpse of Amari Cooper. I thought that was going to be the perfect fit, and maybe he just didn't have the legs to come in mid-season and be the Amari Cooper that we've seen over the years. I see that kind of maybe not alpha wide receiver. They seem pretty intent on spreading it out, but I see some pieces taking more of a step, and if not a Coleman, if not a Kincaid, I think that's something the Bills will look to address, because now how many years are they going to lose to Mahomes, right, without having that kind of guy? I think if there is something to improve, they will look to improve that number one target.
One thing I'll say about Kincaid, he actually had a higher target share this past season than he did as a rookie. Went from 17.7 to 18.8. Now he missed some games in there. The other question I have is what would it have been if the Bills traded for Amari Cooper before the season? If he was there through training camp, would that have been better results too? So if they bring him back next year, is it already a better season because Allen will have played with him? But Jamie, we have left you off the hook long enough. So let's hear your spiel on Josh Allen.
Yeah, well, I know Rahul, you mentioned his age getting up there. He's almost 29. But he has enough rushing upside, even just at the goal line. I think he had like a 3-touchdown game this year. He total touchdowns on the ground. I believe he was close to being the top running back. What did he have?
He had 12 rushing touchdowns.
I thought it was more than that.
I believe James Cook was tied for the league lead. I think he and Henry both had 16. So I think you might be right with 12 or
I thought it was 15, but I could be wrong.
It was 15 the season before for Josh Allen. And I was a big Ray Davis proponent. I said, no way Josh Allen is doing that again, and he did that again. And of course,
I'm seeing 12 here. So yeah, but
okay,
back to back, that's still 27 rushing touchdowns the past 2 seasons. So that feels like it's something that they've kind of discovered they can do a lot more easily, and because he hasn't got hurt on any of them, and he's barely ever getting touched in a lot of the cases. He's big and strong, but he's also fast enough that some of those rushing touchdowns he's going in untouched. So it's not a big long run in the open field where defenders have more time and space to build up kinetic energy when they hit you. Those tend to be more dangerous. So it's something they can protect him, but they're also successful at just running. And again, whether it's him or James Cook, back to the goal line guide, the Bills tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns inside the 5. This is also including the playoffs. So the playoff teams have advantages in that they played more games, but they had 23 rushing touchdowns, tied with the Eagles. And the Eagles did get that extra game having participated in the Super Bowl. They also had 53 attempts inside the 5 through all their quarterbacks and running backs. Maybe probably a Goddard rushing carry as well in there at some point. 53 attempts, only 44 for the Bills. So they had a better percentage as well. They were definitely one of the best goal line rushing teams in the NFL this past season. And that's Josh Allen and James Cook, but we've seen Allen do it more. So as to your point, Rahul, that's going to be the repeatable part. Will James Cook? That's the major question. Sorry, James.
Yeah, I think Cook's actually going to take a little bit step back in the touchdown area next year. So that's just going to help Josh Allen increase his touchdowns either on the ground or in the air. So I usually play Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window. So I'm not worried about Josh Allen's age at 28, 29 years old. He's going to be fine. Even if he's 31, 32, and he does take a step back in the rushing area, he's good enough with his arm where they could just surround him with elite receivers, and he's still going to get those fantasy points for us. I believe he was second in deep ball attempts this year, And even touchdowns, he was top 10. I think he had the 7th most touchdowns. If you can correct me on that, if I'm wrong, through the air.
I can look that up, but
yeah, I know it was top 10. I'm pretty sure it was like 7th overall. Yeah, I mean, the dude has an arm. Surround him with some receivers, and even when he does take a step back with his rushing in 3 years, I could see him slinging the ball down the field. He's still going to be top.
Sorry,
was
Jamie.
that right?
You are correct. Yes, he's tied for 7th with Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
That's hilarious. One spot behind Bo Nix. So
it's a pretty funny list, honestly.
Sam Darnold's 5th.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, both top 5. There's a name I really like though, who's tied for 10th, and who's my current quarterback one in Dynasty, JaydenDaniels. If we're ready to transition to the big debate of the show. JaydenDaniels. He would be someone I would characterize. I don't want to compare him to Daniel Jones, but that same type of the rushing, it's the floor, especially the rushing yards. I mean, he was second only to Lamar Jackson in quarterback rushing yards last year. So that's going to be a big part of his value that I think is repeatable. It's the same argument I wanted to make about BrockBowers that we all agreed on that I wanted to bring here. What are the parts that Daniels did that are repeatable? Him going for 800 rushing yards it's not like they designed a ton for him to run. It was okay. He has free reign to scramble and run. If that's something that's going to be part of his skill set, it's going to be tough to coach that out of him ever, especially since he didn't take any. He took one really big hit, I should say, and I wonder if he learned from that. Right, the rib injury that he suffered mid-season. His points per game, that will be counted in there because he didn't actually miss any games last year. It's, fought through that. It hindered his fantasy performances, but that idea of him running, it does seem like it's repeatable. And outside that one rib injury, it seemed like he was able to protect himself really well. So the coaches won't also be super afraid and try to coach that out of him. So I think that's something that he can do year in, year out, kind of like Lamar Jackson. That's the real comparison here, is that I think he can be Lamar Jackson, what Jackson has been. And so the rushing yards, it's there. I think the speed is there to be the same skill set as Lamar. I think less than 100 rushing yards separated them, or right around 100 rushing yards. And that's with so maybe rushing less with that rib injury mid-season. So curious to see with the second season in the NFL, now that he knows everything he's learned, if that can improve. But then we get to the passing aspect. And I can already hear Jamie's argument against JaydenDaniels, and I've prepared for it, right? And and you know what? We did the same thing with BrockBowers, though, right? BrockBowers to Laporta, right? The rookie breakout all of a sudden. But we're considering them different because we are looking at different factors. And so one of the things I did was compare JaydenDaniels' rookie season to CJ Stroud's rookie season, because that was going to be your argument, right, Jamie?
I was actually going to bring that up. Yeah.
I knew because I know you really well. But and I do think it's a fair point, right? Because that was the whole argument of Stroud. We raised him in dynasty value to some points last offseason after his rookie season. He was QB1, player 101 in dynasty, and all of a sudden I'm doing the same thing with JaydenDaniels. And it was a mistake to do it with Stroud last year, but I'm going to make the argument to why it's not the case with Daniels. But if you want to make the Stroud argument, Jamie, I'll let you do that now.
Well, yeah, because last year at this time, Stroud Keep Trey Cut was the number 1 overall quarterback in Dynasty. As soon as that happened, I went out and sold almost at least half my shares of him, just at a massive value. And it worked out because he did take a step back. JaydenDaniels, I have a lot of JaydenDaniels in Dynasty. I am not going out and selling JaydenDaniels, though, because I do have him pretty dang high. Actually higher than I had Stroud last year in my Dynasty rankings at this time. So I can't really argue against him. It's just the only argument against him is he can't be number 1 because there's a player or two that is just so dang good that you have to kind of put those guys ahead of him.
It's not an anti-Daniels argument, just so pro JoshAllen.
Yes, exactly.
And that's fair.
I do. If he does take a step back, I don't see it being that much. He's still going to be in the top 6. I can see him not falling out of the top 10 at all.
Yeah, that would be a shock because, again,
And
the weekly floor, but also the season-long floor.
Yeah, and if he does fall out of the top 10, it's going to be due to an injury, and we can't predict injury. Debo is now on the team. I think that might help Daniels, just because they're going to have to worry about Debo design plays, like running the ball. They could do trick plays, and I could see, Daniels even rushing more with Debo there.
I just think at the principle, there was a lot of targets that went to the Brown combo of Noah Brown, Diami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus as well. Like, you give those targets to Debo, that seems like that's a more efficient use. If Debo's kind of recovered from injuries, he's kind of just come out and said he wasn't maybe in the best shape last year, maybe not through his own fault, just kind of through injuries. So if he's a better, healthier season from Debo Samuel, I think that just, if anything, helps Daniels' efficiency. He already has twice as many rushing touchdowns in his career as Stroud does through 2 seasons, twice as long as Stroud has played. So that's 6 rushing touchdowns on 891 yards. One of the things I do when I predict touchdowns is look at a stat. I got this from Peter Howard, but the NFL average since 2011, which is where a lot of 2011, that lockout year with the CBA, a lot of rule changes impacting the offense. They went even further in that direction in that CBA. So I think it's a fair cutoff if you want to look at just the last, I guess now 14 years of NFL in these kind of new rule landscapes. I think the average for yards to touchdown, scrimmage yards to touchdown, is about 155. Based off that, on 891 rushing yards, Daniel should have had about 5. I had 5.75 touchdowns. So essentially 6, which is what he scored. So that's another thing I think that is replicable. Like, he didn't have a crazy touchdown season. He basically scored right at what he should have expected based on his rushing yards. So that's something he could have one of those years where he spikes and gets a 10 touchdown season randomly. It's not something that you would expect every year, like with JoshAllen and Jalen Hurts, let's say. But they're also not running for. He had 891 rush yards. He had almost 900 rush yards. Like, he was not that far away from Lamar Jackson. And I think 1,000 rush yards. We've seen Fields do it. We've seen Lamar do it. I definitely think it's there for Daniels to do. The one thing that really stood out for me between him and Stroud's rookie season, the completion percentage. Stroud had a 63.9% completion as a rookie. It went down to 63.2, so it stayed close, but it was the yards per attempt. He was at 8.2 as a rookie. I think that was second in the NFL to only Brock Purdy that year. So it was quite elevated. It dropped to 7 last year. Daniels was at 7.4 this year. That seems like that's repeatable, but his completion percentage at 69. And that was something like all of Stroud's stats dropped, but his completion percentage didn't, because it was already kind of low anyway. So he was doing it on a lot of very very high efficiency, especially with yards. And he wasn't necessarily, there was enough incompletions based on where Stroud was, QB 11 as a rookie, like more than you'd expect. So Daniels was doing it in a really, like, he could repeat everything he did as a rookie. It was 5.2% touchdown rate. Stroud's dropped. He was at 4.6 to 3.8. And I think there's an argument to make that Daniels could go lower than 5.2, but he could also, again, just repeat that easily. And even if he drops lower, he probably drops to where Stroud was as a rookie, like 4.6. So all to say, I think everything Daniels did is different than Stroud, and that we can expect him to repeat that. I mean, if you look at the flat points, Stroud was QB 11. In points per game, he dropped to QB 18. Or I think, in total score, he dropped to QB 18. In points per game, he was at like QB 31 or something. Like, Stroud was super bad. Daniels was QB 5 in points per game. I think he was QB 6 in total points, 21.5 points per game. So he's already, to me, a level above Stroud. And if he regresses like Stroud did, he would fall to where Stroud was as a rookie. As you both mentioned, it's still a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. So definitely think you can have that year in, year out top 10 consistency. That makes a good dynasty asset.
And what did you say JaydenDaniels' completion percentage was?
69%.
Okay, so if you take away like the unpressured throwaways and the drop passes, it's actually a 74% completion rate.
Which is close to the NFL record, right? And I'm pretty sure 69% was the rookie record. So he's already doing things that guys like Lamar Jackson didn't do as a rookie. So Lamar Jackson's second year was his huge breakout year. Daniels kind of had a breakout year, but is there a next level is my only argument. And age difference between him and those other top tier guys, those elite rushers like Lamar and Jalen and JoshAllen, it's enough to intrigue me to have him as the number one dynasty asset and number one quarterback, number one dynasty asset in Superflex. That is.
I mean, JaydenDaniels is best compared to Lamar Jackson, in my opinion.
I agree. I think the combination of speed and the ability to throw touchdowns really well. Only I think Jayden's coming in already as a better developed passer outside the numbers. His sideline throws were really great. That was an area Lamar struggled at. His over the middle throwing was always really great, which is why I think Mark Andrews really benefited from Lamar Jackson's early years, where the best quality targets were going to the tight end. Jayden already kind of has the whole field kind of under control coming in as a prospect, and I thought he got better as the season went on. Just throwing with anticipation. He had 0 passing touchdowns his first 2 weeks. The game against the Bucs and then the Giants, where they just scored a bunch of field goals. So even like it took him some time to get going early, and then still finished with a 5.2% touchdown rate. And the rookie average for first round rookie quarterbacks since 2011 is like basically exactly 4%. So like Stroud went higher than that, 4.6. So maybe to drop below 4% was reasonable, but is Daniels already better than that, where he's at 5.2%, and it feels like that can be replicated. Speaking of replicability, we'll go to our last position, and something that doesn't happen often is at the wide receiver position, repeating as number one overall in fantasy. And that's not necessarily the discussion we're having here, because the number one dynasty asset doesn't have to, if they don't hit number one status the next year, doesn't mean they're a disappointment. But you're both banking on a repeat performance, something that's happened twice, I think, in my lifetime. Technically, we're talking Jerry Rice and Antonio Brown, the only ones to succeed at doing this feat. So will JaMarrChase do it again? You both seem to think yes. So Jamie, you want to start with JaMarrChase? As you're a Browns fan, so bitter division rival or in-state rival.
Yeah, I love JaMarrChase. When he came into the NFL, I actually named my son after him. I called him Chase. So,
I was gonna say Jamar. Okay,
no,
yeah, Chase.
No, Chase.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense too.
No, but he had his best season. I think he had like 170 plus targets, and he had more 40-point games than like any other player in the NFL, probably including quarterbacks.
Yeah, I was gonna say JoshAllen might be the only one to contest that, but you're right. It might be Chase might be number one.
Yeah, I mean, and he's still young. He only four season? I want to say 4 because
I think this is about to be his 5th-year option season. That's why the Bengals were like, "Yeah, we're not going to negotiate with you. We already have the 5th-year option picked up, so like we still have you that season. That's the year we'll negotiate."
And I mean, he never misses time. I believe he only missed like 4 or 5 games in his whole career, which is insane. Especially been playing that long, but yeah, no, I just see him repeating it. Like, even though they tender or they put the tag on Higgins, teams can still go after him. They just have to match it, but even with Higgins there, I'm still putting JaMarrChase number one, hands down.
Yeah, Rahul, go ahead and make your argument, and I'll try and fight against the insurmountable odds of what Chase is now.
I bear very similar things to what Jamie has said, and it really goes back to the point I was trying to make with JoshAllen about the weekly ceiling. If you have someone, as chased it twice against the Ravens, I think the second time they played, he went over 50. He had 49.9 half PPR points. I remember seeing it on my opponent's lineup, being like, why couldn't he have just gotten one more yard and get at least my ADHD would have, or my OCD would have been okay, but as I was taking that loss. But when you have a player that's capable of doing the things that Chase is good at, scoring those long bomb touchdowns with an elite quarterback, along with being one of the top volume earners in the league, I think it's a very difficult combination to beat. And I kind of hitched my wagon to JustinJefferson all of last season. As he fell a little bit in the first round, we weren't sure if the Vikings were going to be good. We didn't know much about how Sam Darnold would perform. Jefferson just lived in that 12 to 17 point range, and he would always be good, but he almost would never be great until I think two of the last 3 weeks he had like 25, 26 point games. But JaMarrChase would just end the week for you, for your opponent with one play. And I think repeatability is one. We are named the top player in the position. Like, even if JaMarrChase does not repeat as the number one player, I have the feel he is the most likely for me to win the most number of weeks at the position. Now, coming to Dynasty, if you look at all the other contenders we could fill in this place, JaMarrChase is the one who's going to be tied to a young ascending quarterback with the most level of predictability. I don't think we can say that for any of the other contenders. And I'd love to hear arguments otherwise. It might force me to change that. But for those reasons, the weekly ceiling and the long-term predictability of who he's going to be playing with, I think JaMarrChase is wide receiver one in Dynasty for me.
So what we've seen is 3 years in a row, we've really seen this new generation of receiver take over. And it's been JustinJefferson was the wide receiver one in 2022. It was CeeDeeLamb in 2023, and then JaMarrChase finally ascended there in 2024. I would say handicapping the odds of who's going to be the wide receiver one in fantasy in 2025, I almost put it as a 75% chance it's one of them and 25% chance on the field. That probably seems crazy. Like, it probably should be the field with a lot more, but I have a really hard time picking out anyone else now that those three have done it and they've proven they can do it. I feel like it's just going to be a contest each year of who's going to have that elite season. And to Rahul's point he just made, yeah, Joe Burrow is probably the quarterback you trust the most. The only thing about Dak is how long is he going to be there? Because I think you can trust him just as much, which is why I think there's appeal to CeeDeeLamb potentially as the wide receiver one. We saw what he did in 2023, just the crazy number of targets and volume, and he did get some touchdown luck there. The one thing Chase has always had is touchdowns, even when the targets haven't always been like his rookie season is kind of wild. It's his lowest target share season. It was one of his best touchdown seasons. He only had 23.7% target share. Oh, it's not that much, but compared to 29.3% even just his second season, or 27.9 last year. And so he's not doing it on like this crazy, like it's pretty consistent. And all three of, I look at the last 3 seasons, all 3 of them have basically been right around there, 27, 26, 27, 28% target share for all 3 of them. I guess the one real difference I see with Jefferson, though, is that's what he's done every single year. He came out as a rookie getting 26.5% target share, which is crazy. Like you can't even expect most players at any point in their career to get that. And that's been his floor. 3 of the last 4 years, he's gotten a 29% target share, including 29.9 last season. Now, he's going to have a totally different quarterback in all likelihood with J.J. McCarthy. But it doesn't matter who his quarterback's been, even the 2023 season with a variety of Cousins and Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins. And I'm pretty sure Jared Hall had targets in there. That's not good. That was still 27.2. So no matter who his quarterback's been, Jefferson has been heavily targeted. And I do wonder, we talk about, tight ends being a rookie quarterback's best friend. I wonder if Jefferson is so good, so sure-handed at catching that's who McCarthy kind of leans on as that safety blanket more than anyone might end up being Jefferson. So I'm not concerned with the target share with him. I think it'll be what it's been his whole career, at least 26%, but likely getting even into the 30% range, even with a rookie quarterback. And maybe McCarthy benefits from getting to throw to Addison and Jefferson. I mean, look what it did for Sam Darnold, who had been pretty awful for most of his career. And I don't think it's a strange coincidence that this career season is going a lot to Justin Jefferson. But it was weird. You mentioned it, Rahul. It was he either had a 100-yard game or a touchdown game, like for most of the first half. But he didn't really put it together like Chase would. Like, okay, these monster yardage games are directly leading to a long touchdown reception. Whereas, okay, Jefferson was getting a lot of yards, but man, it was Jalen Naylor, who was early in the season, vulturing the touchdowns.
Donnie Munt popping up out of nowhere.
So Jefferson wasn't, and that's why I understand like why you'd go Chase, because he's shown that ability to score these long touchdowns his whole career. So he's got that upside kind of locked in. But just the safety of what Jefferson gives, and I guess my last thing is because of the lack of repeating as wide receiver 1, it makes me want to bet against Chase, even though there's no real good, like, sound statistical reason to do so. Tied to Joe Burrow, what we see, the crazy target share, and with T. Higgins getting tagged, that could be, I guess, as we lead into our last segment. I know before the show, Rahul mentioned, should we have a news segment? I guess our news segment, the most like impactful news thing that's happened for fantasy basically since the end of the season, is T. Higgins got franchise tag. Like, that's like the first step. So that we're talking about the news here, an hour and 15 into the show. But knowing that Higgins is back, I think helps Chase, and that teams can't just focus on him. Like, it's the same situation he's been in his whole career, and he's just smashed his whole career. So another double-digit touchdown season. Most seasons, he's the guy from a receiver standpoint I'm projecting with the most touchdowns. But even last year, I was still predicting Jefferson and even Lamb with higher target share. And then that comes down to the ceiling versus floor argument. I think for receiver, I might be more inclined to go with the safe floor of Jefferson, what he just has provided year in, year out as the number 1 dynasty wide receiver. So in my rankings anyway. So yeah, that's I guess that's we'll leave it there as the argument as we get into our true last segment of the show, our trade of the week. And so in the future, get enough views and comments, maybe this is something we reach out to the audience with, and something we could maybe prepare in advance, like ask questions, whether it's on Twitter, this fancy 6-pack Discord. I almost said going for 2 because that's where we're all from. Maybe that Discord as well. But we'll find different trades. But to start the show, we'll start with one of our own. Steal a little bit from the South Harmon boys there with that line. I'm going to start with one of mine, a trade. So I brought it up on the screen at the bottom for those watching the video experience. I guess I'll set up the league talking about the format and settings. It is a 10-team, 1 QB league. We start, I have it in the show sheet. We start 9 on offense. There's also 2 IDP flex spots. It's a PPR league. And while I mentioned 1 QB, we have already voted. And in 2026, it will become a super flex league. So to that context here matters with the pick. As one side, we have Derrick Henry. The other side, we have 2 picks, a 2026 first and a 2027 third in those respective rookie drafts. So since it's my trade, I'll let you 2 talk about what you think of it, and then I'll add any extra context you need and kind of give what I haven't revealed the side, so no one knows what my side is. Maybe I'll do that at the end, but the unbiased opinion. I know Jamie loves giving trade opinions and advice. So Jamie, what do you think of this trade?
Well, I'm thinking when I first saw it, I'm like, no, I don't want to give up a first for Henry. But you did say it was a single quarterback league. How many teams? 10 or 12?
10.
10 teams. You're getting Henry. So next year you're going to compete. So you're going to have that pick 8, 9, hopefully 10. So for the 110 for Henry, the 27th third, I'm not really too worried about that because third round picks are hit or miss anyway, and it's so far in the future. I'm not even thinking about that pick. It's a good add-in for it, but yeah, if it's like a 108 to 110, I like getting Henry just to go out there and win.
And for context, the team that did trade for Henry was a playoff team last year, so could reasonably expect adding Henry to them that they'll be a playoff team again. So this will not be a pick that's inside the top 4 in all likelihood. Yeah,
so I mean, I like both sides of the equation because the person selling Henry probably is a rebuilder, right? Trying to accumulate future first.
Potentially. The one context I do want to add, the draft order for the playoff teams is actually decided by a draft lottery. So winning the league doesn't mean that you necessarily have the 110 either, right? Like that could turn into the 105 in theory. Even if
and how many teams make the playoffs?
6 of the 10. So that's why I say it's unlikely to be a top 4 pick, but 5 to 10, it's almost that's just lottery odds, really.
Well, as long as you win the league, you get paid. I like this, even if you do luck out and get the 105 for this trade. I still like it.
I believe the team that is getting Henry was I mentioned they were a playoff team. I believe they lost in the first round of the playoffs. So Rahul, what do you think of the trade?
That's a lot of interesting context to add, Kyle, especially about the draft lottery. Mm-hmm.
I should have put that in the show sheet to let you guys know that. Sorry, throwing it at you at the end of the episode here.
As the final piece to add to a team, now they were knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. Maybe they need a little more than Derrick Henry, but as a final piece to add, I'm completely comfortable giving away a first-round pick. Let me put it this way. We went into last season saying, come on, this guy is in his 30s, age clip, yada, 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 and he disproved it. Some people are just outliers. I think Derrick Henry is one of those players. He's going to play in an offense that should repeat as one of the top-scoring offenses in the league. I do see it. Wow, terrible commentaries to say I see it both ways as win-win, but truly this is one that could be win-win. If I had to pick one, given that we're doing the show on March 5th, I know it's a 26th first, but on March 5th, I prefer to hold my value in draft picks. So if I had to pick a winner, I'd go with the draft pick side. But come week 16, week 17, when Henry's putting 200 on the poor Houston Texans as he does year in, year out, I'll probably be like, that was nothing to pay.
We got another Ravens-Texans Christmas game, I wonder.
Yeah.
They're both division winners. They'll play each other for sure. But yeah, I'll reveal the side. I did sell Derrick Henry for the first and third. And the added context of motivation is this will now be my third 26 first that I've gotten. So trying to stack picks in that first super flex draft.
Yeah.
First year we become super flex, trying to be the guy with multiple firsts. Because frankly, this is really tough. Like I'm thinking this, like based on, like I sent this offer out to several teams. Didn't quite get to every single team, but it feels like there might have only been one or two teams willing to take this trade on. The league reaction was very much, whoa, Henry for a first, which I think that sounded like Jamie's initial reaction too, right? But yeah, as you've thought about it more, the calculated risk of, can this guy be a title contender? And we'll shout out Bam. For anyone who watches on the Going for Two Live Network, Speak On It, he's oftentimes guesting. This is the Speak On It league to a certain extent. It's Low Steam Mix, one of the co-hosts of that show, who commissions the league. So definitely was spoken about. So shout out to Bam. He's a good guy. Always in the comments on that show. Gave some good comments, and good trade partner here, wanting to move his picks away for players. And I'm trying to stack. Also thinking, like, I got Derrick Henry last year as a trade-in. It was moving Tony Pollard. I can't remember all the pieces. It was quite complex, and he was almost a last-minute throw into the deal. Like, we kind of had something in place, and they're like, but I want Tony Pollard too. My response was, okay, we'll throw in Derrick Henry, and that'll be it. And it was weird to get him such a throw-in, and get such a great season for him. And my thought was, if I just get a first for him now, the value that I've, again, as a throw into a Pollard trade and still pushing that forward to a first, I felt was good value, knowing that I might be leaving something on the bone, because I do want to compete. So I'm not trying to like blow it up and rebuild, but when looking at my team, and I thought there's a few pieces that maybe I should build away from, as we'll mention, get the flexible assets in the picks, especially stacking picks together next year, thinking that helps increase the value of each of them. If I have multiple, someone wants to get one, based on how difficult it's been to get those picks, a lot of other people aren't moving them. I'll be the one willing to move them because I've got multiple. So yeah, trying to get an edge there through the multiple picks.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. Especially 10 team with 6 making playoffs. I would almost leap a little more to rebuild when not making playoffs means a top 4 pick. So if that was part of your thinking, just try to target the next year's draft and then go for it hard from there. I get that. So.
The other thing too is you can't fully tank in this league. Man, year one, my team was awful. I was the worst team in the league, and I ended up with the 103 because you actually have to play for your pick. It's a play in bracket, so yeah, you've got to win to get that 101. So if you fully tank, you might end up with the 104 every year because you can't win any of those consolation bracket games. So my team was so bad that I ended up with the 103, but turned it around in playoffs the last 2 years, but have lost in the first round. So. Do I need to kind of revert course a little bit? So just right now, I think it's the time to structurally make moves to try and move away from a Derrick Henry, move away from these older running backs. If I need to buy back in later, I can. Henry specifically might not be someone I want to buy. This is someone who maybe values picks a little less, because there's a lot of people who weren't willing to get up the 26 first for Henry. And again, I sent this offer to, I think, at least half the league before I got to BAM. And maybe the teams I was going for lower in the standings are teams that are fully in rebuild and don't want to buy anything. He was someone who he seems more willing to have the players in the pick. So, I have to look at other teams if I want to buy a different running back, because maybe I've lost the points that Henry could potentially get. But it didn't necessarily help me last year. Man, I was 5 points away from a first round buy. And that's the lesson I want to leave here with everyone. Every point matters through the season. We're talking 2,200 points scored over the course of 14 weeks, and 5 total points is what lost me the tiebreaker for the second to third seed, and then I lost in the first round. Like, does my season change? Do I have a better week in week 16? And that first round bye does actually propel me to a championship, or at least a final, maybe. So I guess that's the parting lesson, that every point matters, apparently, or at least every 5 points matter.
If I could share an extremely similar story as we sign off, that league that I was talking about, JoshAllen, hero ball, 51 points in front of my very eyes as I sat at SoFi. I didn't end up making that playoff by 6 points because I was competing with a team who had the Joe Burrow and Chase Brown, and the Bengals punted to the Cowboys. I thought, I'm good, I'm fine. Yeah. And they immediately give the ball back. I think Chase Brown rushes a bit, and then Burrow throws the touchdown to Chase, and it's all over. It was 6 points at the end of the day.
That relates right back to the story, because Akili has that stack in that league, and he's the guy that got that 2 seed. Yeah. So a minute left in that game, I had that first round bye by 20 points or so, and then that one play he gets it beats me by just enough. Yeah. Sure. And then he won the league. So kudos to Akili. He earns his championship belt, even though he hasn't got the belt. Shipping to Canada sucks. Apparently. Go Canada. But go support the Fantasy Six Pack, whether it's here with all the other content that's happening. A lot of baseball stuff too on the YouTube channel, some basketball too, lots of sports. It's Fantasy Six Pack of sports, really. NFL, NBA, NHL, golf, MLB. I mean, I could do CFL content if we want to get that sixth sport, if that's really necessary. But we'll be on every week here on the Dynasty Six Pack every Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We're looking forward to continuing different Dynasty discussions. And I gotta say, guys, successful first episode, almost at an hour and a half. So we definitely love to talk. A lot of ideas to share, though. I think that's. I'd say we try and keep it to an hour every week, but it probably will be closer to this hour and a half mark. I feel like knowing how much we all love Dynasty and love to talk.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think I can only speak for myself, but I definitely had a great time. And like I was saying at the start, this is like me dipping my toe back into Dynasty football. And as we just got into it, I feel like my love for this game of ours just came flooding back. All the strategy, all the nuances, the shared misery that we have. There's so many emotions that we go through playing this game, but we all love it. And to wrap that point back up, I'm really excited to do this show with you guys. Great first show, and I'm really looking forward to all we've got in store for everyone listening.
Jamie, any parting final thoughts?
No, I actually had fun. I can't wait for next week. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into these rankings that we have. So I'm looking forward to that.
And we'll certainly build off this first episode. And I guess give a small preview. In episode 2, we'll be talking about the top 2 tiers at each position. And obviously the top tiers in some positions we've kind of almost, in fact, we have entirely covered, especially at running back, let's say. Ran through that really well at the start of the episode. So some of it will be building off what we spoke about today to really dive into what the next tier of players are. But as always, Fantasy Six Pack, like I mentioned, the YouTube channel, tons of great stuff going on there. So be sure to subscribe. Anyone on the audio feed, I'm sure a lot of those podcasts get placed there as well. So you can subscribe, rate, review, anything to help us out and help out the Fantasy Six Pack network. There's a Discord as well. I think there's some free entry, but also some paid perks to unlock some things on the Fantasy Six Pack Discord, and of course, FantasySixPack.com. And in season, Jamie and I have our weekly articles, whether it's wide receiver cornerback matchups that Jamie does, or my goal line guide, try and help predict touchdown performances. Those will definitely be there. But looking forward to I'm just doing this podcast. I'm going to try and get to writing some more in the off season. So we'll figure things out with Joe. And yeah, I guess you can follow us on Twitter. Rahul's at SmallTalkFF. Jamie's at JamieProg. I'm at Senra Says. I guess I got to say, Dynasty Six Pack out. 10-4. I mean, 10 minus 4 is 6. So I guess that math works out, right? And we'll leave on that. And of course, this great intro video with our super great logo by our team, by the way. The guitar tracks by a certain someone. Maybe next episode will reveal who that is. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, everyone who watched, viewed, listened, commented with us live here. Looking forward to doing it all again on every episode of the Dynasty Six Pack. Bye, everyone.